On February 2, 1959, 9 experienced mountaineers died in the Ural wilderness, and their own tent was found slashed from the inside. What I want to walk you through today isn't just a tragedy. It's a locked-room mystery that survived 65 years of investigation without a single conclusive answer. The Dyatlov Pass Incident has been called the strangest mountaineering disaster on record, and that's not hyperbole, it's what the Soviet authorities concluded, right here in their own case files. Exhibit 1, the hikers themselves. Igor Dyatlov led a group of 10 undergraduates and 1 geology student, all from the Urals Polytechnic Institute. January 1959. They were experienced, not novices fumbling in the dark. Dyatlov had organized similar expeditions before. These were skilled mountaineers heading into winter terrain they trained for. On January 25th, they set up camp on the eastern slope of Kalat-Siak, that's Dead Mountain in the Mansi language. Elevation around 600 meters. Temperatures dropping toward -40, nothing unusual for a winter expedition. They had supplies, a tent, sleeping bags. The plan was straightforward: summit, descend, go home. Exhibit 2, the last communication. On February 1st, Dyatlov sent a messenger down the mountain with a note. Quote, "We have discovered a pass. Tomorrow we'll be in the settlement." That was the last message anyone received, not a distress call, not a warning, a routine update about their progress. When they didn't arrive on schedule, a search party was organized. It took weeks, the weather was brutal, the terrain unforgiving. But on February 26th, searchers found the tent. And this right here is where the case stops making sense. The tent was half buried in snow, and it was slashed open from the inside. Not ripped from outside by an avalanche or animal, from inside. Multiple cuts, deliberate looking in the fabric itself. The hikers' belongings were still inside, sleeping bags, clothes, supplies. No sign of struggle, no blood, no note. Just an open tent on a frozen mountainside and no bodies nearby. Exhibit 3, the bodies. They found them scattered across the mountain over the next weeks. Some were only a few hundred meters from the tent. Others were over a kilometer away. Most were wearing minimal clothing despite sub-zero temperatures. One hiker had only 1 shoe. Another had no shoes at all. The autopsy reports, and I've reviewed the summaries from Soviet medical records, showed something stranger still. Most died of hypothermia, but 3 showed signs of trauma. Fractured ribs, internal bleeding. 1 victim's tongue was missing, not bitten off in death throes, cleanly absent. The Soviet pathologist noted it without explanation. Exhibit 4, the radiation. In 1959, this detail was buried. Soviet authorities found elevated levels of radioactive contamination on the clothing of several victims. Not lethal doses, but measurable. The Soviet Union classified the finding. For decades, nobody outside the investigation knew. Now, theories have multiplied over the years. Avalanche, military secret weapons testing. A Yeti, yes, really, that's been proposed. But each explanation has a fatal flaw. An avalanche wouldn't explain why they cut their way out of the tent first, why they'd leave equipment behind, why they'd die scattered and undressed. Exhibit 5, the Soviet closure. In 1959, the Soviet government closed the case. Official cause, an unknown compelling force. That's the exact phrase they used. Not avalanche, not accident. A force so unknown they couldn't name it. Then they sealed the files for decades. The radioactive contamination. That detail didn't surface publicly until 1990, after the Soviet Union had already begun to crack. Even then, the full autopsy records weren't released until 2019. 60 years. That's how long the Soviets kept the medical evidence locked away. Here's what we know for certain. 9 skilled mountaineers entered a tent on a winter night. At some point, they cut their way out from the inside and fled into a blizzard wearing almost nothing. They died of hypothermia scattered across the mountainside. And something the Soviet investigators couldn't or wouldn't name, compelled them to do it. Was it panic? Possibly, but panic over what? An avalanche warning wouldn't explain the tent slashed from inside. Hypothermia delirium doesn't explain the organized scatter pattern. And it certainly doesn't explain why they moved away from the tent, their only shelter, into certain death. The radiation, the missing tongue, the internal injuries, these aren't footnotes. They're pieces of a puzzle that doesn't fit any conventional frame. The Soviet Union had reasons to keep this quiet. Whether it was military testing, a cover-up of something worse, or simply an unexplainable event they couldn't control, we may never know. What remains is this: 9 bodies, 1 tent, and an official explanation that amounts to we don't know. In 2019, Russia reopened the case briefly. They concluded it was an avalanche, despite the evidence contradicting it. The files were closed again. Some mysteries, it seems, are meant to stay unsolved. The Dyatlov Pass incident isn't just a tragedy. It's a reminder that even in the modern era, Even with governments and investigators and medical expertise, some deaths resist explanation. The mountain keeps its secrets, and sometimes the most honest answer is simply, we don't know why they ran into the dark. Subscribe, there's a new unsolved case every week, and each one's weirder than the last.